From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Doc Staples bringing you Unconquered with Doc Staples. As always, this podcast is brought to you by EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price. By Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida. Nobody is going to be better as a realtor in the greater Jacksonville area than Luis. If you're selling your house and you want it to look absolutely perfect and to be staged and photographed perfectly, he's the guy. Training in photography and videography. He knows how to make your house sell. Let him know you heard about him from the Unconquered podcast. Same with Shenandoah Newsma of shenrealestate.com in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. If you're in the Research Triangle area, you're not going to get a better realtor than Shen. PhD level preparation and expertise in the real estate market in this region. And then beyond that, also by Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. If you live in the greater South Florida area, let them know that you want to have the garage that is the envy of your neighbors. Garage Makeovers. Let them know you heard about them from Unconquered with Doc Staples. All right, here we are. We got 2 more games left. One of them is in my backyard. Actually, I won't be able to go to it, unfortunately. Ordinarily, I would have actually covered this one. Would have been in the box and had a nice opportunity to do all of that. But unfortunately, I'm flying out to Boston. Well, fortunately for me, in other respects, but I'm shipping out to Boston the morning of the game, so will not be able to be in Raleigh for this game, even though I'm normally in Raleigh at this time, or at least a little outside of Raleigh. But Raleigh has been a bit of a house of horrors for Florida State, so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they can buck some trends. They've been awful on the road this season. They've been awful on the road in Raleigh for some years, and North Carolina State has actually been good at home. So a number of those things, just in terms of some of the soft factors, really not looking great for Florida State. Just right off the page of the initial analysis here. But as you all know, soft factors aren't really what win football games as often as not. They can sometimes be sort of a tiebreaker, but it really does come down to, who's the better team between the lines that night. And we'll find out that coming up on Friday. Now, it's going to be interesting because this is a matchup where if you've watched these two teams play over the course of the season, they've both been kind of Jekyll and Hyde type teams. I mean, NC State is one of two teams to beat Virginia this year. You would think, okay, wow, that says a lot about them. And they're also a team that got blown out by Duke, 45-33. They got beat by the same Virginia Tech team that, honestly, Florida State was a lot better than last week. They lost to Virginia Tech 23-21 at home. They got smoked by both Notre Dame and Miami of Florida. 36-7 and 41-7, respectively. And they gave up 53 at Pittsburgh, 53-34 game. And then they beat Georgia Tech, 48-36. And that's a Georgia Tech team that has only lost 1 game. That's the only game Georgia Tech's lost. Now, granted, Georgia Tech also very nearly lost at Boston College last week. So, you wonder what kind of late season shape they're in. But still, they're the only team that has beaten that team, one of 2 teams to beat Virginia. And yet there are other games in which they have not looked competitive. They haven't even looked like they could stop anybody on defense at times. So this is very much a Jekyll and Hyde team, very much like Florida State. I mean, Florida State beat Alabama in the opener. Florida State, despite some terrible breaks on the road at Virginia, was in position to win that game. They were in position to beat that Miami, Florida team in the fourth quarter, despite the fact that they had played so poorly in the first half and gave up some terrible plays. And yeah, a bunch of people are going to continue to insist, no, Miami stepped off the gas. Miami did not step off the gas. I looked at the film, and every one of Miami's coaches who could have said, well, we should have played it a little bit better, in the second half. We kind of took it for granted and stepped off the gas. They could have said that, and that actually would have made him look better. But they didn't. No, we didn't step off the gas. We just played it. They just played a lot better in the second half. There was stuff there that they didn't take in the first half that they did in the second half, in the fourth quarter. Well, guess what? So Florida State's been a Jekyll and Hyde team, a lot more Hyde of late than Jekyll, but it's been the same problem. So this is one of those games where it really is going to depend on which teams show up, which NC State and which Florida State team are playing. If it's the Florida State team that played against Alabama, against the NC State team that played against Miami, against Notre Dame, against Virginia Tech, against Duke, Florida State will blow them out. But if it's the Florida State team that lost to Stanford against the Virginia Tech team that beat Virginia and beat Georgia Tech, scored 48 on Georgia Tech, well, then NC State's going to blow out Florida State. This game could go either way. But there are some commonalities here in terms of what has happened when NC State has been successful and when they've gotten blown out and when they've gotten whipped. And so that's really what this game's going to come down to, is can Florida State do the things that the other teams did that were able to beat NC State? Now, we're going to start NC State on offense, Florida State on defense. And really, this game comes down to a couple things on this side of the ball. If you look at what the commonalities were in the games that NC State has been able to win, in the games that they've then lost, there are a couple things that just stick out like sore thumbs. I mean, it is obvious what has led to wins and what has led to losses. So, NC State, first of all, actually, we're going to start in another place. When it comes to the quarterback position, and this is where things are really dangerous. C.J. Bailey, 6'6", quarterback, 6'6", 213, moves pretty well, can really spin it. When he's clean, when they keep him clean, he's been excellent. 4.0 big-time throw percentage, 1.9 turnover-worthy play percentage when he's kept clean. 14 touchdowns, 1 pick, 81% adjusted completion percentage, so he's putting the ball on target consistently. Gets the ball out in 2.39 seconds on average, which is excellent. Usually you want that at about 2.4, 2.5. Tommy Castellanos, by the way, is about 3.1. So he gets it out and gets it out on target. 14 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's really been good when he's kept clean. Under pressure, he is a completely different dude. 5 touchdowns, 8 picks. 41. And so Pro Football Focus grade of 81 when he's kept clean, 41 when he's not. Big time throw percentage when he's not kept clean, when he's pressured, 2.3. Turnover worthy plays, 5.8%. Completely different player when he's under pressure. And when he's been pressured, when they played against teams that have better defensive lines, that are able to get after him a little bit, NC State's offense is a completely different offense. Now, the other thing that goes along with that, and that's where I was going to start, but I decided to start with Bailey, because these two things are connected. If you look at the games that they've won, they've run the football well. In wins this season, they've rushed for 5.74 yards per carry. In losses, 3.47, so 2.3 yards per carry worse in losses than in wins. That's your difference. And I'll just give you some examples. When they beat Virginia, they ran the ball 35 times for 216 yards, 6.17 yards per carry. When they played Virginia Tech and they lost to Virginia Tech, 32 carries for 59 yards, 1.84 yards per carry. When they lost to Notre Dame, 1.82 yards per carry. When they beat Georgia Tech, 34 carries for 243 yards, 7.15 yards per carry. When they lost to Miami of Florida, 20 carries for 23 yards, 1.15 yards per carry. That's what this game comes down to. Florida State's going to have to stop the run and get enough pressure on the quarterback in high leverage situations to be able to do what's necessary to stop this offense. It starts, though, with stopping the run. NC State wants to run the football. Their best player is Hollywood Smothers, 6.48 yards per rush. He's a really good player, and he's a threat in the passing game and in the running game. Now, interestingly, he was dinged up and didn't play against Georgia Tech. Only 7 carries for -2 yards against Miami. So, that's something to keep an eye on. It's exactly how healthy he is coming in. And then Jaden Duke Scott is their other back. He had 196 yards rushing against Georgia Tech, 8.17 yards per carry. So he's very capable. Those guys are the straw that stirs the drink for NC State's offense. And Florida State, in this 3-3-5, which they're most of the time in a four-man front, I see so many people talking about, I don't believe in the 3-3-5 defense, and it's not the 3-3-5 that they're playing most of the time. Most of the time they're in a 4-2-5, personnel-wise too. Actually, they would be better, I think, if they had 3 really good linebackers to put out there with the right mix of defensive linemen, but they don't. So they're sticking with a 4-man rush or with a 4-man line most of the time, and they don't really have ideal personnel to kind of do what they want to do. But I digress. But it boils down to, is Florida State going to be able to limit those 2 players, Smothers and Scott, in the running game? That's what it's going to come down to. Can they stop those guys on first down? Can they put North Carolina State enough behind the chains where you're able to actually now rush the passer and force CJ Bailey to have to play from a little bit muddy pocket with a little bit of pressure, those sorts of things, because he's a completely different player the moment he has to move off his spot, the moment he's not throwing really quickly to that first read in rhythm, the moment you force him to change off of that and you get a little bit of pressure, he's a totally different dude. So this game's going to come down to that. On this side of the ball, it's going to be as simple as that. Can you stop the run, and can you get a little bit of pressure on the quarterback? Because if you can, you're going to be able to limit their offense pretty significantly. Again, against Virginia Tech, 21 points. Against Notre Dame, 7. Against Miami of Florida, 7. It's real simple. If you're able to stop them like that, that's where it's going to go. Now, the discouraging thing, 8.47 yards per carry against Pitt. And that's a Pitt defense that likes to stop the run. But they had a couple big plays. They had a 60-yarder. Smothers had a 60-yarder where he just ran away from the defense. He's a guy, if you let him loose, he will run away from you. But, you're going to have to tackle those guys at the first level. You cannot let those guys get to the second level. And in terms of threats, they've got a few guys that are legitimate threats if they can get the ball in their hands. Anderson at wide receiver is a guy I like. I think he moves well. The other guy that I think is a real potential problem, Noah Rogers is another guy that I kind of like as well. He's not as much of a big play threat, but the other, I think tight end wise, they're pretty good. Justin Jolie is a guy that he's got 5 touchdowns on the year, and he's a guy just in terms of athleticism and build and so on, and the way that Bailey likes to throw over the middle, and as bad as Florida State has been defending the middle of the field, defending between the hashes, that's where a lot of the damage, they're going to try to do a lot of the damage right there, is with the tight end, seam routes, these sorts of things, digs. And those guys, if Florida State's not able to stop the run and get pressure, that's where NC State's going to cut them up, and ultimately they're going to score 35, 40 points. Because that's what they do if you can't stop the run well enough to get pressure on the quarterback in those higher leverage situations that you can create by stopping the run. But that's what you have to do to them. You have to make them feel as though they're behind the sticks. You have to get them into harder leverage situations, get them into a passing game where you're able to rush the passer against them. And this is where it would be really helpful if Florida State had more pass rushers on their roster. But it is what it is. Now, let's flip over to the other side of the ball. And in terms of what to expect, by the way, on the offensive side, in terms of what to expect, I would say, realistically speaking, I'm kind of going to split the difference. They've been sort of unpredictable. They've been very up and down. 3.95 yards per play against Notre Dame total, 2.86 yards per play against Miami of Florida, 7.42 against Pittsburgh, 8.7 against Georgia Tech. So which one are you going to get? I'm going to split the difference. I think they're going to wind up with somewhere around 5.5, 6 yards per play. And that means somewhere in the, 31 point range, most likely, in terms of what they're going to score. That's my expectation. So I think if Florida State's going to win this game, they're probably going to have to win a bit of a track meet. Because I do think, again, the problem for Florida State all season has been if they play a quarterback who's capable of getting hot, and that guy gets hot at all, there's holes in the defense on the back end to be able to exploit. And they've not been able to get enough pressure consistently to offset that over and over again. That said, NC State has enough holes potentially up front that they might be able to do that. But right now, I'm not betting on it. I'm going to say somewhere around 5.75 yards per play. Let's say between 28 and 31 points, somewhere around there. I think the magic number for Florida State to feel like you're going to win this game is probably somewhere between 34 and 38. So that's where you are on that side of the ball. Now, flipping it over to the other side of the ball, looking at the Florida State offense against the NC State defense, well, defensively, they've also had some struggles on the season. They're giving up 6.36 yards per play on the year, and that includes 2.89 given up to FCS Campbell. So, let's be honest about this. This is not a good NC State defense. Notre Dame, 6.83 yards per play. Miami of Florida, 8.3. Georgia Tech, 7.99 and lost. 6.45 yards per play given up to Pitt. They've given up more than 6 yards per play in 6 consecutive FBS games. The only FBS team this season that has not gone for more than 6 yards per play against NC State is Wake Forest, and they were at 5.4. So this is a defense that they've not been able to stop anybody. That's really what this game's going to come down to. I think in terms of what you're looking at on the other side, as I said, I think they're going to score some points just based on what you've done, based on what Florida State's given up, and on the fact that they've got a quarterback that has been able to get hot. They've got some guys that can make plays. But they've given up yardage. And most of the damage this season has been on the passing side. Now, that's the problem for Florida State, is that they've got a situation quarterback-wise and passing offense-wise where they're just not very good. But this is a team where this could be another game where Deuce Robinson just goes absolutely wild. It's possible that Deuce Robinson just goes wild. But I also think that this is a game where a couple of the faster receivers for Florida State are going to have some opportunities for some really big plays. Because NC State doesn't tackle super well. One of the places where they've been very soft is against the screen game on the edge. Miami was able to take advantage of it. Miami of Florida was able to take advantage of it. Notre Dame had some success there. Pitt had a lot of success on the perimeter. They've given up those plays on the outside, those kind of extended running plays. And this is where, again, if there was a time where Squirrel White was going to come out of hibernation, come out and start, eating some of those nuts that he hid in the ground, this would be a good game for that. This is an opportunity for a guy like Mekhi Danzy to have some plays downfield. I think he can run away from some of these guys, because I think NC State has some serious problems in the back end. The real question, and I think what is going to determine this game, is whether or not Castellanos, who has regressed as a thrower since coming to Florida State, as everyone who's worked with Tony Tokar so far has done. He's, mechanically he is a mess right now. But if he can somehow regress back to the mean a little bit, or progress back to the mean, actually, in this case, if he can make a few throws and just get the ball to playmakers, they're going to score points in this game. Because, again, this is a team that has given up plays to everybody. Just thinking about this, Notre Dame, 342 passing yards. Pittsburgh, 423. Georgia Tech, 408. Miami of Florida, 367. And a lot of times they weren't even having to really throw a bunch downfield. These were not guys that were making a bunch of contested catches. These are wide open situations. And these are guys catching it on the edge and just taking off for 8-10 yards at a clip. You're going to have opportunities in this game. That's why Florida State is favored in this game, despite the fact that this is in Raleigh, and despite the fact that this is a Florida State team that has been really bad on the road and against a team that's been better at home than they've been on the road. But it comes down to that. So I look at then a couple things here. In terms of run defense, they gave up 5.78 to Miami of Florida, 4.58 to Georgia Tech, 3.67 to Notre Dame, 7.39 to Virginia Tech in that loss, and 8.03 to Virginia in a win. So to me, the question is whether or not Florida State's going to be able to find running lanes. And I think this is a game where odds are Richie Leonard is not going to play, one of the better offensive linemen on the team. But if Florida State's able to run the ball at all on first down, and I think Tommy Castellanos, as I mentioned last week, he started to look, burstier, looked like he had a little bit more of that get up and go when he took off running last week. If they're closer to where they were at the very beginning of the season as a rush offense, then all of a sudden I think this game changes, and I think Florida State deserves to be the favorite at that point. But this is the thing that sort of needs to be considered. Florida State has not actually been a dominant run team. Like, there was that middle part of the year where they were not a dominant run team once Castellanos got hurt. And you could see the difference. So 4.69 yards per carry against Alabama, 49 carries for 230 yards. And a lot of that was, and against a really good defense, and a lot of that was Castellanos. The threat of his legs and doing it with his legs was a major factor. He gets hurt against Kent State. 48 carries for 256 against Virginia. They had some big plays there, but most of that was not Castellanos. He did have some. And then you get to that middle part of the season and 3.47 yards per carry against Miami of Florida, 4.25 against Pitt, 3.09 at Stanford, 3.75 against Wake Forest, and 4.23 at Clemson. They just weren't good enough running the football for what they need to do. You've got to be better running the football if you're not a team that can consistently throw the football. But last week against the Virginia Tech team that held down this NC State run offense, 5.15 yards per carry, 46 carries for 237. It started to look more like the run offense that you saw early in the season for Florida State, largely because you started to see that extra burst from Castellanos, and they had to honor that. And, this was a Virginia Tech team that they've given up rush yards to good run offenses. They've not given rushing yards up to bad offenses this season. So you can think about it, 3.22 yards per rush given up to South Carolina, but 7.08 to Vandy, a better run team with Diego Pavia. 6.38 given up to Georgia Tech, 1.44 to California, 1.84 at NC State. So you can see the way that this works. And then Florida State able to actually run with more success against them. So to me, sort of the wild card here, the change that makes me more optimistic for Florida State in this one is ultimately that Castellanos started to look snappier when he started to take off downfield. And so I said on the other side that Florida State's probably going to have to score. This is going to have to be a bit of a track meet for them to win this game. And I think offensively, they're in a game where they should be able to make this a bit of a track meet, because I think this is a bad NC State defense. And I think they're going to be able to find some success in terms of the run game and in the pass game. I think they're going to be able to get some plays from Deuce Robinson and some of these guys in the pass game And I think this is going to be one that's going to go down to the wire. I'm kind of playing it to the middle because, like I said, either team could blow the other out with a couple turnovers, those sorts of things. This game could go 21, 28 points in either direction, and I wouldn't be surprised. And you know what? What's interesting is I got on this show, and I was absolutely, as I began the show, I was absolutely convinced that I was going to pick NC State to win this game. But as I keep looking through these numbers, as I keep seeing what NC State has done, and I keep reflecting on what I've seen NC State do defensively, and then thinking about what difference there was offensively for Florida State last week with Castellanos looking burstier as looking more explosive as a runner, which is really what you needed from him all season. I think the Florida State offense is going to look healthier as a result of Castellanos being healthier. And then it's just a matter of, can he hit a few passes downfield like he did last week to Deuce Robinson? Can he find a little bit more consistency? Well, that would be great. But even if he doesn't, if he finds Deuce Robinson just enough, or if he finds a couple of these guys just enough, there's going to be opportunities for some big plays in this one. And so when I come down to it, I think the team with more playmakers against the defense, I mean, Florida State's defense has not been great. They've not been even good at times. But in terms of the one thing that you need to be able to do, they've generally been able to stop the run. Last week was the one exception against Virginia Tech, but that was a lot of quarterback run game, and NC State doesn't do as much of that. Otherwise, you're looking at 3.03 yards per carry against Miami of Florida, 3.69 against Pitt, 3.14 against Stanford, 2.13 against Wake Forest, 2.72 yards per play given up at Clemson run game wise. I think they're going to be able to stop the run well enough to be able to set up the offense to get some scores and win this. So I'm going to actually go with that. In terms of the prediction part of the show, I'm going to go with that. I'm reversing the decision that I had initially, and I'm going to go with FSU to win on the road. And I think actually, by the way, if Florida State does win this game, I think it does save Mike Norvell's job. Everything that I'm hearing is that if Mike Norvell wins one of these last two games and doesn't get blown out in the other one, odds are he's going to be coaching at Florida State again next year, but you won't have the same general manager. There will be some back office changes and some other things. Now, the hope is that Florida State starts to get serious about, external NIL and doesn't treat the cap, the house revenue sharing as a cap, as a hard cap, that no, there's no external stuff. They're going to need more. They're going to need more support, and they're going to need to be willing to do that in order to move forward. But I think this is probably going to save Mike Norvell's job, and there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to be disappointed about that all off season. A bunch of people who will be rooting against their own team, which is sad when you get to that place. But I that's what I think is going to actually happen in this one. I think with Castellanos a little bit healthier, I think they'll find a little bit more rhythm offensively, and they're going to be able to run the ball enough and get a few big plays. And I'm going to go Florida State to win this game. I'm going to go FSU winning on the road in Raleigh, which is rare enough for Florida State over the last decade. And you can go back even to 1998. This has been a problem. But I think they're actually going to do this. I'm going to go with Florida State to win the game. 55% likelihood of winning, which means +1 or -1 is the difference in the game. Turnover margin, one turnover, one direction or the other, and it flips the outcome. But I'm presuming even turnover luck. I'm going to go with Florida State wins 34-31. And talk about a nail biter in Raleigh. Be a great game for me to be at, but unfortunately, I will not be able to be there. As I said, I will be in Boston. Odds are the Hot Takes podcast will be delayed if I am able to do one at all, but I will do my best to get one out. But we'll see. I'll be on the road, like I said. I'll do what I can. But until then, this has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Doc Staples. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. I am especially grateful for those of you at the Dynasty level. That is Brian Leininger, Dave Blair, Jack Horton, Jonathan Kennedy, Lee Caswell, Travis Smith, and Tyler Kashishki. You all are far more generous than I deserve. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.